As a coach, I see runners make one massive mistake, and it's quietly wrecking their running. They strength train like bodybuilders, more sets, more volume, more days in the gym, and it leads to fatigue, stiffness, and injuries, not faster running. Today, I'm going to show you why this doesn't work for runners and what to do instead if you want to run stronger, longer, and pain free. So, the problem most runners don't mean to mess this up, right? They'll Google the best strength workout, leg day routine, gym program for runners, a gym program for strength, and they end up copying bodybuilding routines. And unfortunately, a lot of coaches who design strength plan for runners also do bodybuilding routines just because they don't know any better. That's just what tradition's been passed on to them. So you often see these strength workouts for runners or multiple sets per lift, high volume because they think, okay, high volume works for running. Maybe I should do high volume for lifting. So now a lot of runners now are doing high volume running, high volume lifting, and that could be a recipe for disaster, right? You're doing 5 to 6 days a week of lifting, right? Because you think, oh, if lifting is good, more lifting is even better. Doing 5 hours a week or more of lifting on top of running. Again, but here's the problem. This is designed for muscle size, not athletic carryover, right? This is designed for someone who wants to be a bodybuilder. But again, many runners don't know this. And even there's a lot of coaches who don't know either. They think, okay, I'm just going to give this workout to my athletes or do this for myself. Like, oh, I'm not saying they don't work at all, but again, it's really high volume and it's going to tax your body, put you at over risk for overuse injury. And if you want to learn more about like what I think is like a better way for runners to program their strength training, a runner specific framework to just be an athletic runner, be healthy, be injury free, check out my free course, link in the description. It's called Running Pain Free, so you can check that out. So why bodybuilding style fails runners? For runners, this approach leads to excessive fatigue, right? Obviously, if you're spending so many hours in the gym lifting, you're pumping the iron. Even if you're doing things for the lower body, right? If you're doing lots and lots of volume, you're going to be excessively fatigued. There's a reason, a lot of even power lifters and bodybuilders will take some like time off between heavy lifting sessions to allow their legs to recover. But now if you're doing a speed workout, tempo run on top of high volume leg day, right? Obviously, it's going to put you lots of fatigue. And I always hear from a lot of runners who do this style of like multiple set bodybuilding style routine that, oh, I'm always tired around my speed runs or my tempo runs. They don't feel fresh. They're always tired. It's only when they get to the taper, because they start tapering down from the lifting, that they start feeling recovered just because they're not doing as much high volume lifting. The other thing is when you're training like a bodybuilder, you tend to train in a single plane of motion, right? So maybe you'll just train in the forward plane, the sagittal plane. For example, you'll just do squats here or even lunges or heck, you may even doing barbell. Well, you obviously, again, lifters like biceps curls, right? You're just staying in the single plane. That can lead to stiffness, muscle imbalances, and oftentimes it's a poor transfer carry to running, especially if you're just using machines. A lot of times people, when they do these bodybuilding routines, will go on a machine, the leg press machine, the leg curl machine, etc. And again, it doesn't have a direct carryover to running. Sure, it can help with just muscle size or hypertrophy like a bodybuilder, but when you have these muscle imbalances, it's going to put you at higher risk for injury, especially when you do excessive high volume on top of high volume running. So remember this, just because you have big quad muscles doesn't mean that your knee joint is resilient. In different ranges of motion. I've actually encountered a lot of bodybuilders who get like muscle rupture, like quad tendon rupture, just because they squatted too low because their body wasn't used to the depth of squatting low enough, or just climbing down the stairs because their knee wasn't just resilient from squat going down the stairs. There is a trade-off just being all completely hypertrophy. Sure, there is some benefit to muscle size, but being a maximal muscle size like a bodybuilder does have some negative trade-offs. Obviously, you don't see the top bodybuilder winning marathon competitions or being the fastest runner out there, right? And likewise, you don't see the top marathoner winning bodybuilding competition. They're not going to be built for the most muscle size. So strong calves, same thing. You could have big bulky calves, but doesn't necessarily mean you have a strong Achilles tendon. Oftentimes, I also see those folks getting tendon injuries because they just train like bodybuilders. So muscle size alone doesn't equal tendon health, elasticity, coordination, force production, right? Power, speed generation. See, running is elastic, cyclical, right? Reactive. You have the tendons to react as the foot hits the ground to be able to rebound. Bodybuilding is slow, isolated, and fatigue driven, right? So a lot of times these bodybuilding, again, you're going slow, staying in the same plane of motion. Again, it could be great for muscle size, but it's not going to have a direct carryover for athleticism. So what strength for runners actually is? Here's the truth most runners don't want to hear. Strength for runners should be high intent, low volume, right? You don't have to do, you know, 10 sets of like squats or lunge, right? You don't need endless and endless sets. You need the right stimulus. And for most runners, one high quality set to fatigue, or what's called momentary muscular failure, is enough to drive muscle strength, tendon adaptation, bone density, neuromuscular control, right? That's like balance, proprioception, especially if you're doing functional movement. You're doing lunges, split squats, lateral squats, or lateral lunges, single leg deadlift. There are different variations, of course, of different exercises. And just to be clear, I'm not saying you could never use machines, but you shouldn't just use machines in isolation. We'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So it actually works. So the main lift, single set approach. So for your main lift might be, especially for a lower body, would be like the squat or the deadlift, or it could be the lunge or the split squat. Different rep ranges. Typically, I'm a fan of doing a 5 rep max or 7 rep max. So when you're doing the repetition, you have to go to failure, right? If you're a complete beginner, you go near failure. But as you get more advanced, especially if you're only doing one set, should be going to essentially muscle failure, where you could barely lift the weight a single rep. So you're like failing at rep 7 or so. Now, if this scares you, you could go a little higher. You could do 8 to 12 rep max. That's fine. Or near max or near failure. But as you get more, again, more experience with lifting, you do want to, especially with single set, you have to go to momentary muscular failure, fatigue. Deadlift, 3 to 5 rep max. And again, with the lunges, 8 to 12. And then you can do accessory work. This is where you're doing the weak links. So let's say you have weak hamstrings or weak quads. You'll do higher repetitions, maybe one set of like 30 to 40 reps of hamstrings. You may even do 50 reps, right? I'm not saying you don't never do high reps. You can do high reps, especially for weak links, because weak links do need more volume, but they don't have to come from volume of doing like 10 by 10, like 10 sets. You could do one single set, but high reps to get the volume there. So the glutes, let's say you have hip external rotators, you could do high rep clamshell, high rep bridges or hip thrusters. Low back, you could do good mornings, Supermans. Calves, you could do calf raises, standing calf raises, seated calf raises. But again, you have to do multiple sets. You could do one set, but high repetition. Again, 30 reps, 40 reps, even 50 reps, etc., especially if you have weak links. And also with weak links, you could also train them multiple times a week. For example, you could do them 2 or 3 times a week, because oftentimes you just do this kind of workouts at home. You don't necessarily have to go to the gym. But for the heavy lift, about 1 to twice a week, you do the heavy lifting for them, the squat or the deadlift. And if it's really heavy, like a really experienced, you might only do heavy lifting once a week, because the more experience you get, the more recovery time you need. And it's oftentimes not always feasible to go really heavy multiple times a week. You might go super heavy, or heavy effort lower body day once a week for the legs, for example. And if you'd like to train upper body, obviously you could do heavy body, upper body on another day, or this different time of the day. Anyhow, you want your strength training to support your running, not competing with your running. That's why I'm a big fan of the single set approach, where you're not spending so many hours at the gym. You're not spending like 90 minutes, 2 hours at the gym doing multiple sets, long rest breaks. You could get in and out with a lower body work, especially just doing lower body alone, in like 15 minutes or so. Now, if you're doing a full body routine, you can still get out in like 20 to 30 minutes. If you're paying attention, you're staying focused to what you're training, you get in and out with a full body routine in 20, 30 minutes. I'm saying, upper body, core, lower body, right? Especially if you're smart about it in terms of how you pick your exercises and how you select them. But don't skip elasticity. This is where a lot of power comes from. See, muscle strength alone is enough. Runners need elastic strength, right? You need tendons to be able to rebound, jump, short explosive work, jump squats, drop jumps, or people call these depth jumps, where you're on a box and you jump down and you land. Speed squats, right? Being able to pick up the weight fast, where you got your barbell, kettlebell, dumbbells. You're just doing the lift for speed, right? So speed training, but with weights. So this trains tendon stiffness, rate of force development, RFD, right? So how fast your muscles can kind of turn on and fire. Great for athleticism, running specific power, especially with the jumping, the landing. Now, some people will argue like, oh, but running already is a series of single leg jump. Why do more jumping or bounding? The thing is, running, you're not doing maximal jumping. See, when you're doing these box jumps, you're actually jumping a lot higher than you are when you're running. You're not jumping as high as you are when you're doing like a squat jump, like a vertical jump, or jumping up to like a 20-inch box or 30-inch box. You're not jumping that high in running. But when you're jumping as a separate workout, plyometric workout, people call this, for power workout, you do develop a lot of explosive power in your legs, which makes you a stronger runner. So you need both maximal strength, but you also need power or explosiveness, right? And it doesn't have to be long. Now, you may hear some experts say, oh, it has to be 40 jumps, right? You don't have to start at 40 jumps. If you're a beginner, you can start with just 3 to 5 jumps, right? You may just start with 3 jumps, 5 jumps, go up to 10 jumps, 15 jumps, etc. And then you can work your way up into to doing 40 box jumps or 40 drop jumps. And this, yes, you can break it up into sets, especially if you're a beginner. But at the same time, you also can start low, the lower reps, and then work your way up to the higher jumps. So the time reality, this is how it works. And also, oh, let me go back to the jumps. You could also do the jumps as part of your warm-ups, right? You could actually do squat jumps as part of a warm-up for a strength session or as part of a warm-up for a running session. You can even do jumps in between workouts or exercises. So like example, let's say you're doing squats, deadlifts, calf raises, some good mornings for the lower back. You could do some jumps in between those different exercises to still get up your jump training in conjunction with your strength training. So the time, right? Why does it work? Again, I'm a big fan of time efficiency. Now, the naysayers will say, but can I do multiple sets? You can. No one's stopping you for doing multiple sets. But if you're limited on time, you're limited on your recovery ability, it's much more time efficient just to do a single set. You're going to get most of the benefits from strength training by doing a single set to fatigue. You can, again, most cases finish a workout 15 20 minutes. If you're doing full body, it might take you 30 minutes, but 2 to 3 times per week. You do it, John, after your runs. Sometimes I actually split lower body and upper body, so I could just do the lower body in like 10 or 15 minutes. And again, you don't have to spend 90 hours in the gym, 2 hours in the gym doing lifting sessions, 6 days a week in the gym doing a lifting bro splits where I'm going to train back and buys, chest and tries, right? You don't have to do those kind of things. You could get a full body routine. You could do lower body day and some upper body sprinkled throughout. Right. And now you have more time for recovery. You won't be as sore and stiff. You'll be able to recover for your speed workouts, your tempo runs, right? And this is, I think, where it really shines is the recovery. You have more time for recovery between your workouts. Because yes, can you do multiple sets? But if you're limited on time in recovery, it's much better to do single sets, and then you can maximize your running, especially if your goal is to maximize running. Even if you want to be a hybrid athlete, I'm still a fan of this approach as well. Because again, you could manage your recovery a lot better, especially if you work a full-time job, you have kids to take care of, etc. So, but some caveats. Let's be clear. I know people are like, but wait a second, there has to be some benefits to multiple sets, right? And there is. If your goal is powerlifting, multiple sets make sense, right? If you want to, because powerlifting is also a sport. You have to have the skill to pick up a barbell. Powerlifting, if you guys are not familiar with it, it's the big three: squat, deadlift, bench press. You're tested on your ability to maximally squat, bench, and deadlift. And to do that, you have to be really good at lifting that bar. So you have to practice the skill of lifting that barbell. So multiple sets can make sense because now you're developing not only the skill of lifting the weight, because you have to be efficient, but then you also need to get the repetition in, the volume. So in this case, it's a volumes game. Same thing with muscle for bodybuilding. If your goal is to maximize hypertrophy, you want to get as jacked as possible. You want to get those piping quads, biceps. You want to compete in the bodybuilding stage. Yes, there is benefit to doing high volume, multiple sets, for sure, right? Or you just love it. If you just enjoy multiple sets and that's what you love doing, continue doing it. But for the vast majority of runners who are very busy or injury prone or just don't want to spend hours in the gym, you could get most of the benefits, right, of strength training without having to train multiple sets, high volume, being hours in the gym, right? Single set training, again, delivers most of the strength intended benefits without the excessive fatigue. You have more time for recovery. And even for the hybrid athlete, you want to be well-rounded. I still think this is actually a better approach for the hybrid athlete, unless you really, again, want to maximize for powerlifting or bodybuilding. And even in rehab, some people are like, oh, but multiple sets is used in rehab. You can, folks, you could actually do single set for a rehab as well. For example, instead of doing 3 sets of 10 reps, you could just do 1 set of 30 reps. You'll get a similar stimulus, right? So volume doesn't have to be the number of sets. You could just do high reps and also get volume as well, that way as well. Sets are just a tool. And yes, there's different strength attributes you target with low reps, high reps, speed reps, right? I understand that. But what I'm trying to say here is that single set training can give you, and you can also develop maximal strength. For example, doing in the 3 to 5 rep max, you do 1 set, 3 to 5 rep max. You could also develop maximal strength as well with a squat, with a deadlift. I think of myself when big into barbell lifting, actually would do single set training and show up for like local like college, these like informal competitions, but like among my friends and stuff. They're like, "Whoa, Ray, how you lifting?" I think I was like, my best deadlift was about 400 pounds, 405 pounds, and I was only about 150 pounds or so. They're like, "Whoa, that's crazy!" And I was only doing single set training, so you can definitely improve your strength. I'm not saying I'm a world class lifter or anything like that, but it is possible to improve your strength with single set training. So don't think that you have to do multiple sets. It is possible to improve your squat, your deadlift. So don't let anyone tell you that single training can't work. No, unless we talked about the power lifter or the bodybuilder, where you're really trying to be the top of your class, you could get most of the benefits with single set training, and it's more time efficient. And another thing, machines can hold runners back. So a lot of, again, routines rely having machines where they remove the balance demands, reduce the coordination, they assist the lift, limit the real world carryover. That's why you see many people can leg press far more than they can squat. Machines do have a place, right? Isolation, rehab work. A lot of times, maybe you injured your knee, you have to isolate your quad or your hamstring. That's fine, but you shouldn't just rely on machines alone because they could create imbalances and cause other weak links in your body that you even were aware of. That's why I'm a big fan of doing a body weight or function movements in condition with lifting weights or doing bands, right? So you could do a banded squat, deep squats. So you train different ranges of the motion, deep lunges. So there's different ways of strengthening the muscle groups and different ranges of motion. So bodybuilding is a tool, not the system. Athletic strength for runners is about building durability, coordination, elasticity, repeatability. So train like the athlete you are, not the physique athlete you're not trying to be. All right, again, if your goal is not to be a bodybuilder, stop training like a bodybuilder, right? Train like an athlete, train explosive, train the different movements, right? And be time efficient, be smart about it. If you're not trying to be a power lifter or a bodybuilder, you don't have to do multiple sets unless you really love to. You could get most of the benefit with single set training, especially if you're trying to maximize for running. So I have a limited number of one-to-one coaching spots for runners who want to get stronger, faster, and pain-free without overtraining. So if you're curious, there's a link in the description to apply for a free consult call. We could jump on a call to see if coaching is a good fit for you to help you get stronger, get faster. I work with people who want to run their first marathon, ultra marathons, or just people who just want to get pain relief and get back to running pain-free. So more volume isn't better for runnings. Strength should support running and not compete with it. You can get strong without living in the gym. Strong runners stay running. Fatigue runners break down, and I see this many times when beginner runners, they get excited. They had to do more volume with strength training, and they end up breaking down. So don't make that mistake. Train smart. Do the single set. Give it a try. Even if you've been doing multiple sets in the past, you'll actually know. So you can actually maintain a lot of your strength and maybe even get stronger doing single set training. So because you're not always as tired, especially if you're already doing high volume running, you'll have more time for recovery to recover between both your run workouts and your strength workouts.